So I'd like for us to hear the Lamentations reading again. That's the first reading from today. So if you want to, as you're hearing this again, I want you to imagine, because this text was written when the Israelites were in Babylon. They were in exile. Okay, so they were being held hostage from their homeland. They were having false gods imposed upon them. So as you hear this reading, again, imagine that you are in that desperate place that the Israelites were in exile. So from Lamentations, the steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. His mercies never come to an end. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. The Lord is my portion, says my soul. Therefore I will hope in him. The Lord is good to those who wait for him and to the soul who seeks him. It is good that one should wait quietly for the salvation of the Lord. It is good for one to bear the yoke in youth, to sit alone in silence when the Lord has imposed it, to put one's mouth to the dust. There may yet be hope. To give one's cheek to the smiter and to be filled with insults. For the Lord will not reject forever. Although he causes grief, he will have compassion according to the abundance of his steadfast love. For he will not willingly afflict or grieve anyone. That's what Jeremiah has to say to us today in the book of Lamentations. That's what Jeremiah had to say to the people in exile in Babylon. It's a word of hope, certainly. But we can hear the desperation in that. The words are there. Yes, I believe in God. I believe that God will do wonderful things, Jeremiah says. The desire to believe those words is there. But there's a question in the text. There's a question. The question remains, why aren't God's steadfast love and mercies being shown to us now? Why can't we see God's steadfast love and mercy today? That was the question of the Israelites as they endured years of exile from their homeland. They heard these words of hope, but could they really believe them after not seeing them every day, after not seeing it come true? And it's our question at times as well. In times of great trouble, we too find ourselves asking, what is God doing about this? Where is God in this tragedy? When we're in the midst of a trial, when we're doused daily in pain, when we're dealing with our friends and our families struggling with illness or disease, when our children are being manipulated by others, it can seem futile. Like there is no way out of this dark cave that we have found ourselves in. And those words that Jeremiah spoke today in Lamentations, they're nice words, but they sound to us like they did to the Israelites. Words that are not our reality. Words that we want to hang on to, that we want to believe, but words at times that are difficult to see in action. William Butler Yeats wrote a poem, The Second Coming, and he wrote this poem in the wake of World War I in Europe. And his poem gives words to these doubts that we have, these feelings of worry that we have when we're in the midst of struggle. The Second Coming goes like this. Things fall apart. The center cannot hold. Mere anarchy is loosed upon the world. The blood-dimmed tide is loosed and everywhere. The ceremony of innocence is drowned. The best lack all conviction, while the worst are full of passionate intensity. it makes us wonder what happens if the center cannot hold. God's love endures forever, says Lamentations, but we wonder, what if it doesn't? What if our child dies? What if our bodies fail us before we're ready to let go of our independence? What if Alzheimer's sets in? What if the center doesn't hold? What if things fall apart? And they will, no matter how hard we try to hold ourselves together. No matter how much preparation we do, no matter how much sleep we lose over getting things right, things fall apart. No matter how hard we try to hold on to that center, we cannot hold things together. And sometimes it doesn't even seem like God is holding things together. As bad news mounts, as situations seem impossible, things seem to be falling apart. And it's from that desperate state that the Israelites in exile cry out to God. And it's in that state of desperation that we hear God's response in the voice of Jeremiah. The Lord is good to those who wait for him. God does not willingly afflict or grieve anyone. These words are not empty promises. They can feel like that sometimes in the midst of struggle. But they are words that God has backed up time and time again. Yes, we doubt, we wonder why things are falling apart. But knowing that God has never, ever let things fall apart in the past gives us hope, even when the center seems to fail. When we hear the stories of the Bible, when we hear stories of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the fiery furnace, when we hear that story of God saving them from the fiery furnace, we have hope when our house burns down or there's a massive fire. When we hear the story about Abraham and Sarah wanting a child desperately and God finally giving them that child in their old age, that gives us strength to hold on when we feel like we aren't being the parents that our children need. And when we read about God creating the world out of absolutely nothing, our faith is bolstered when we feel like our world is spinning out of control. When we hear these stories of when God has fulfilled God's promises, when God has held things together in the past, we can have hope that God will continue to hold things together now and forever. We sometimes want to believe so desperately that we hang on with just out of sheer will. We hang on to these words of hope. We hold on to the center with slipping and sweating hands. When things are bad and we just need some sign that God is at work, we sort of claw at any scrap of hope we can hold on to. But today, Jesus reminds us, God reminds us, that we're not called to hold on to that hope so desperately. Instead, God has simply given us the gift of Jesus on which to stand. Instead of us trying to hold on to the center in place, hold things together, God has given us the gift of Jesus, the firm foundation on which we are to stand, on which we can stand, even when things are falling apart, even when the center seems to be slipping. Jesus himself picks up the pieces of our fractured lives and he lifts our world back into axis when the center seems to have slipped. The center cannot hold by itself. Things do fall apart. Our lives shimmy and shake. People die. Bad news comes to those who least deserve it. But Jesus is our stronghold. He's the one who created the world, and he's the one who conquered death. And he is the rock on which we stand, the one on whom we can rest when things fall apart and the center doesn't hold. Thanks be to God for that. Amen.